This installment in our series on RuneQuest and the campaign we're developing for it is on culture. One of the big barriers of any, especially fantasy, but of any role-playing setting is the setting. For players to get comfortable with the setting often takes an investment of time that, as adults or with families and other responsibilities, we simply don't have the time to devote. So as I work on building this setting to put RuneQuest through its paces, this is in front of me all the time. How can I build a rich fantasy setting that has a very low threshold for buy-in for the players? This particular installment is about culture. Having cultural aspects be something that is a rich part of play, yet doesn't require a lot of homework or outside effort on the part of the players. How do we accomplish that? So what I intend to do, at least at this stage, is to encourage the players to be responsible for the creation of the everyday aspects of culture that their characters would take for granted. I'll focus on the broader palette of what makes these cultures distinct, but they'll focus on the everyday, not mundane, but the regular parts of culture that people living in this world for real would tag as being important identifiers of that culture. Something like accent comes to mind, although the creation of accent is usually beyond the realm of most people. But mannerisms, naming conventions. How are the culture's names built? How many meals per day do they eat? Do they have any restrictions on what they eat? Clothing styles, that sort of thing. This material I would like to leave in the hands of the players, where I look at the long-term ebb and flow of culture and what main ideas cause friction between these cultures. As I mentioned in an earlier clip, I'm intending to have the initial setting be a city where these cultures are thrown into contact with each other. So, I mean, the first idea, of course, will deal with some sort of merchant city, perhaps coastal or in the middle of a great plain, where these cultures must come together to trade. But the other big aspect is religion. And because this is RuneQuest, we have a lot of support for developing rich religious aspects to play. So how will a fantasy world where the gods are quite real and accessible and quite human in their understanding or portrayal among the people of the world, how will the worship of these deities from culture to culture cause conflict or cause connection? I think this is an intriguing part of fantasy play or alternate history play, but it's a little easier to access in fantasy because you can start from the ground up. With religion, trade, and regional differences providing a basic foundation for the characters, the players will be able to riff on and generate ideas that make their characters distinct, which then we can take and wholesale apply as a filter or skin over other people from that culture. And this will be a very quick way to generate connection and to share creative duties. And this sharing of the creational burden will also cause completely new ideas about story or direction for adventure than one of us working alone could come up with together. This is not new. But allowing the freedom or encouraging the freedom to generate culture brings in so many aspects. And I won't be able to predict now what cultural aspects will be defined. It could be weapon aspects. How important is the sword in a culture, or the spear? What does it represent in that culture to be trained in its use? Who will be allowed to represent the nation or the culture on the field of battle? Men, women, people of a certain age. Does the culture have a gender bias? Yes or no? How important is religion in the warfare or the trade fair of a culture? All of these things will be open, which means I need to create a very interesting and dynamic city where all of these factors can quickly and easily be brought into conflict, or at least clash. How do I do that? In my series on simulation and immersion, one setting idea, or setting creation idea, I proposed was the use of archetypes, and how using keywords or triggers of things that are already familiar, without going so far as to name them, is a nice form of shorthand to allow the players to quickly understand what you're talking about without poisoning them with something they may have already seen, such as saying, "It's like the bar in Mos Eisley," means that everyone there will be imagining the bar in Mos Eisley, and they'll be thinking Star Wars, rather than saying, "It's dark." Right? Saying just, "It's dark," you know, "this bar is dark," carries completely different feel than "it's like the bar in Mos Eisley." Of course, we'll need to say more than "it's dark." It's dark. It feels dangerous. There are pools of light all around, and you can see the faces and hear the voices of creatures and races that you don't normally associate with, in tones that suggest that not everyone is happy to be there. Now this brings to mind, to me, the mood of that first visit into the bar in Mos Eisley. And I can get a pretty clear picture off of that. But I'll need to do this for a city, an entire city. The city will need to have a character, and its underlying conflicts and attractions will need to be made obvious from the beginning. It's a fairly big challenge. And I feel that rather than starting with the city, I need to start with the people. In our next clip, we'll look at the different factions or races from which the player characters may be drawn.